I want to tell you something about coral reefs, and I want to start by being honest. Most of what you know about them is wrong. Not because anyone lied to you, because the truth is too uncomfortable for postcards. The coral reef has become, for almost all of us, a symbol of beauty. Clear blue water, bright colors, paradise. That is the version we sell. That is the version on screensavers and travel brochures. And it is, in the most important way, a lie. Because a coral reef is not what you think it is. It is not a garden. It is not decoration. It is not a passive backdrop that nature redraws if we damage it. A coral reef is a city, built by tiny living animals over thousands of years, layer by layer, generation by generation, patiently, painfully, slowly. The towers and walls you see are partly alive and partly cemetery, with every beautiful surface resting on the skeletons of everything that built it before. And right now, while you watch this, those cities are at war with themselves, fighting battles too slow for human eyes to see, and losing more of them every year. This video is about what coral reefs actually are, about the silent war happening inside every reef, about what is killing them faster than they can heal, and about what is left behind when a reef dies, because reefs do not just disappear, they become ruins. By the end of this, you are going to look at every reef image you ever see for the rest of your life completely differently. And there is one part of this story almost nobody talks about. If you want more videos like this, the honest kind, subscribe before we start. It is the single biggest thing that helps me keep making them. Get comfortable. The lights down low if you can. We are going into the city, and the city is not what you think. Look at what you're seeing right now. Sunlight cutting through clear blue water, coral towers rising from the seafloor, walls of color in every direction, fish moving like traffic between the structures, light dancing across the surface above. This is one of the most beautiful images the natural world has to offer. People travel across the planet just to see it once. They put it on postcards. They use it as the screensaver on their phones. The coral reef has become, for most of us, the symbol of what ocean beauty even means. And I want to ruin it for you. Gently, over the next 20 minutes. Not because I want to hurt you, but because almost everyone who looks at a coral reef is looking at it wrong. And the truth is so much darker and so much more important than the postcard version we have been sold. So let me start here, with what you are actually looking at. This is not a garden. It looks like a garden. It looks like nature laid down a beautiful underwater forest of bright colors and called it good. But that is the illusion. A coral reef is not a garden. A coral reef is a city. An ancient, layered, crowded, fragile city, built by tiny living things over thousands of years. And what you are looking at right now is the result of one of the slowest and most patient construction projects on the entire planet. Let me show you the builders. The coral you see, all of it, the giant walls and the delicate branches and the brain-shaped boulders, is built by animals, not plants, not rocks, animals. Tiny soft-bodied creatures called coral polyps, each one no bigger than the tip of your finger, often much smaller. A single polyp is a small, simple animal, related to jellyfish and anemones, with a ring of tiny tentacles around a central mouth. On its own, a single polyp is almost nothing. You could miss one entirely without noticing. But coral polyps do not live alone. They live in massive colonies, sometimes millions strong, all genetically identical, all working together, all building. And what they build is a skeleton. Each polyp, over the course of its life, secretes calcium carbonate, the same material that makes up limestone, and uses it to construct a small, hard cup beneath its body. Every polyp in the colony does this, generation after generation. Each new polyp builds on top of the skeleton left behind by the polyps before it, adding another layer, another increment, another fraction of a millimeter of structure. The reef rises, slowly, painfully slowly, over centuries. I need you to understand the timescale here, because the timescale is the entire story. A healthy coral reef grows at a pace measured in tiny fractions per year. Some grow only a centimeter or two annually. Some grow even less. The massive reef structures you're looking at right now, the ones that take your breath away, are the work of thousands of years. Tens of thousands in some cases. Hundreds of thousands in the case of the oldest reef systems on Earth. What appears to be a single continuous structure is actually a stack of generations. Ancestors piled on ancestors, all the way down, each one having added their tiny architectural contribution to the slow vertical climb of the city. This is the part that changes everything. Because once you understand what you are looking at, you start to see it differently. That enormous coral wall is not just a wall, it is a record. It is the accumulated remains of countless tiny lives, all of them long dead, their bodies now stone, with a thin living veneer of current polyps on top, doing the same patient construction work their ancestors did, adding their own millimeter to the structure before they too die and become part of the foundation. A coral reef is, in the most literal sense, alive on the surface and dead underneath. The living layer, the colorful, breathing, growing skin of the reef, is just the current generation. Everything below them, all that beautiful stone-like structure that gives the reef its shape, is the cemetery of every coral polyp that ever lived in that place. Every reef is a city built on its own dead. Every beautiful coral wall is, when you really look at it, a wall of bones. And the city is still breathing. That is the strangest part. The polyps on the surface are alive right now. They are extending their tiny tentacles into the water, catching microscopic food, hosting algae inside their tissues that photosynthesize sunlight and feed them sugar in return. They are doing the work of being alive, in a city built entirely by their ancestors who did the same work, on the bones of generations beyond memory. The whole structure is a living thing on top of an enormous stack of death. So when you look at a reef, do not see a garden, see a city. A city that took millennia to build. A city built so slowly that the construction is essentially invisible to us. A city where every building is made from the skeletons of past inhabitants. A city that is, in a real sense, both monument and ongoing project at the same time. Architecture so patient that it makes everything humans have ever built look like it was thrown together yesterday. And this is the thing I need you to carry forward into the rest of this video, because everything else we're going to talk about depends on it. Coral reefs are not passive scenery. They are not decoration. They are not a renewable backdrop that nature will redraw if we damage it. They are slowly built, painstakingly assembled, living architecture, and what took 10,000 years to construct can be destroyed in a single bad decade. The math of it is brutal. Building is slow. Loss is fast. And we are about to talk about what is being lost, and how, and why, and what it actually means to break something this old. So tell me, before we go any further, in the comments, had you ever thought of a coral reef this way? As a city instead of a garden? Because for me, that single mental shift, garden to city, ancient to fragile, decoration to architecture, was the thing that changed how I see them. And I want to know if it lands the same way for you. Welcome to the city. It is not what you thought it was, and we are losing it faster than we built it. There is something I want you to try. Look at the reef in front of you. Really look. Pick one coral, any of them. Watch it for a few seconds. What is it doing? Almost certainly nothing. It is sitting there, not moving, not appearing to act. To your eye, the coral is essentially a piece of colored stone, indistinguishable from a rock except for the color. The reef looks peaceful, static, almost meditative in its stillness. That is a lie your eyes are telling you. And the lie is built into the way your brain works, not into anything that is actually happening in the water. Because what you are looking at right now, in this perfectly still image of a coral reef, is a war. A genuine, ongoing, brutal war. The coral is not at peace. The coral is locked in a battle for survival with every other coral around it, with the algae trying to grow over it with the parasites probing its surface, with the chemistry of the water itself. Every coral on this reef is fighting. Every single one. Right now. The reason you cannot see it is that you are too impatient. The war is happening at a speed your brain was not built to perceive. Let me show you what is actually going on out there, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Coral competes above all for one thing: space. Space on the reef is everything. It is real estate, it is sunlight access, it is water flow, it is survival. Every coral needs a piece of the reef to live on, and the reef has only so much surface area. So every coral is, in effect, in constant negotiation with its neighbors over territory. And those negotiations, when they go badly, are not polite. The first weapon is growth itself. Some corals grow upward, building vertically toward the light. They become towers. Why? Because the higher you grow, the more sunlight you intercept, and the more sunlight you intercept, the less reaches your neighbors below you. A coral that grows tall is, in a real sense, casting a shadow over the corals nearby. That shadow is a weapon. The corals below it lose access to the light their internal algae need to photosynthesize, and they slowly weaken. Growing up is not just architecture. It is warfare conducted through geometry. Other corals grow outward instead, spreading laterally, creeping across the reef surface, expanding their footprint by inches per year. When their growing edge meets another coral, the encounter is rarely friendly. The advancing coral can overgrow the slower one, climbing right onto its surface, smothering it. The loser, buried under a layer of living tissue from the winner, slowly dies. The reef record is full of these silent territorial overrunnings, layer by layer, century by century, recorded in the dead skeletons inside the structure. And then there is the chemical war. Many corals release compounds into the water around them, chemicals that hurt or inhibit the growth of neighboring corals. It is invisible to us. The water looks clear and still, but it is not still. It is full of biochemical messages, attack signals, defensive responses, an entire chemical conversation happening between corals that are technically just sitting next to each other. The coral that releases the right compound at the right time can poison the neighbor. It has decided is too close, slowly damaging it, killing the polyps along the contact zone. Some corals go further. They have specialized stinging cells, similar to the cells in jellyfish tentacles, and they can deploy them against rival corals that get too close. The encounter looks like nothing from above, just two corals near each other. But at the contact zone, microscopic harpoons are firing, venom is being delivered, and one coral is methodically killing the cells of another. The fight can last weeks. Eventually, one side wins, and the boundary line is redrawn. The reef has new geography, written in the small, invisible deaths along the front lines. And we have not even mentioned the bigger threat. Because while corals are fighting each other, they are also locked in a constant fight with algae. Algae grow fast. Corals grow slow. If conditions tilt even slightly toward the algae, algae can spread across the reef surface and smother the coral underneath. A reef where the corals are healthy and the herbivores that eat algae are abundant is a reef where the corals are winning. A reef where the balance has been broken, where the herbivores are gone or the water chemistry is wrong, is a reef where the algae are winning and the corals are losing, slowly but surely, often without anyone noticing until it is too late. This is the part I want you to really sit with. The coral reef is not a peaceful place. It looks peaceful because the war is happening at a speed we cannot perceive. If you took a time-lapse camera and recorded a coral reef for 10 years, then sped it up to a few minutes, you would see something completely different from what your eyes see now. You would see corals lunging at each other in slow motion. You would see overgrowth and retreat and chemical poisoning happening like a battle in a documentary. You would see the lines of territory advance and retreat, the dead coral pile up along front lines, the algae creep in and get pushed back. You would see, in clear visible form, the war that is happening right now, in this exact moment, while the live footage looks like nothing. A war documentary filmed at the wrong speed. That is the reef. Every still, beautiful image you have ever seen of a coral reef is a single frame of a slow-motion battlefield. And the battle never stops. Not for an hour, not for a day, Not for a year. Not for 1,000 years. The reef has been at war with itself, and with every animal and microbe and chemical force around it, for the entire span of its existence. The peace we think we see is just our impatience. The reef has been fighting the whole time. We have just been too fast to notice. And this matters, because in the next 2 chapters, we are going to talk about what happens when the war finally tips and the coral starts losing. Because right now, across most of the world's reefs, the coral is losing. The balance is broken. The slow war is being won by the things we never used to think would matter. And the city of bones is starting to crumble. So tell me, in the comments, does it change how you see a reef, knowing this? Knowing that every still image is a frame from a fight you cannot see? I find it almost unbearable in a way, because once you know the war is happening, you cannot watch the reef the same way again. Every gorgeous shot becomes a battlefield, and every battlefield eventually has a side that loses. The reef is not peaceful, it is just patient, and the war is not going well. There is a particular kind of horror that does not look like horror. You can recognize obvious damage. You can see destruction, blood, broken things. Those register immediately. But there is another kind of damage, a quieter kind, that does not look like damage at all. It looks clean. It looks even, in some ways, beautiful. And by the time you understand what you are actually looking at, the wound is already deep and the patient is already in trouble. The reef has that kind of damage. It is called bleaching. And bleaching does not look like death. Bleaching looks like the reef has been polished. Like someone has come through and stripped the color away, leaving everything pure, pale, almost luminous in its whiteness. The reef goes from a riot of color to something that looks almost holy. Cathedral white, bone white, ghost white. That whiteness is what we are talking about in this chapter, because the white is not a finished thing. The white is the moment of crisis. The white is what the reef looks like when it is calling for help, in the only language it has. And most of us, looking at it, do not even recognize the cry. Let me explain what is actually happening, because the biology of it makes the horror so much worse once you understand it. Most reef-building corals do not live alone. Inside the tissues of every coral polyp lives a population of microscopic algae, tiny single-celled photosynthetic organisms called zooxanthellae. These algae have lived inside coral tissues for an enormously long stretch of evolutionary time, and the partnership between them and the coral is one of the deepest and most successful collaborations in the entire history of life. The algae get a safe home inside the coral. They get reliable access to sunlight in the clear, shallow waters where coral lives. They get carbon dioxide and other nutrients from the coral's metabolism. And in exchange, the algae do something extraordinary. They photosynthesize, capturing sunlight, and they share the sugars they produce with the coral. They feed it. They give it the energy it needs to grow, to build its skeleton, to repair itself, to do everything that being a coral involves. This partnership is the engine of the reef. The algae are doing the work that the sun does for plants on land, except they are doing it from inside an animal, feeding their host with the energy of light itself. The coral cannot really live without them. Not for long. Not as anything resembling a healthy coral. The relationship is so deep that you cannot easily separate the two organisms in your mind. The coral and the algae have, over millions of years, become almost a single thing. And the algae are what give the coral its color. The vivid pinks, golds, greens, oranges, browns, all those gorgeous tones that make a reef look like a stained glass window come from the algae inside the coral tissue. The coral itself is mostly transparent. The color you see is the algae living inside it, doing their work, photosynthesizing, alive. Now imagine what happens when that relationship breaks. The most common trigger is heat. When the water around a reef gets too warm for too long, the partnership between the coral and the algae starts to fail. The algae, under heat stress, begin producing compounds that are toxic to the coral. The coral, in response, expels them. It ejects the algae from its tissues. It cuts the partnership in an act of biological emergency, because the only way to survive the heat is to get rid of the partners that have, under stress, started to poison it. And the moment the algae are gone, the color goes with them. The coral's transparent tissue is left over the white calcium carbonate skeleton beneath, and what you see in that moment is white coral. Pure white. Clean white. The reef has, in a sense, turned its lights off. This is the part that makes the horror so specific, because a bleached coral is not dead. Not yet. The coral animal is still alive, technically. The polyps are still there, still trying to function, still hoping conditions will improve. The reef looks pale and clean and almost beautiful, but what you are looking at is a city of animals starving. They have lost the partnership that fed them. They are running on whatever reserves they have left, and the clock is ticking. If the water cools quickly enough, if the stress passes, the algae can come back. The coral can be recolonized. The color returns. The partnership reforms. The reef recovers. This happens. It is documented. Bleaching is not automatically a death sentence, but if the stress lasts, if the water stays too warm for too long, if the coral, weeks into the crisis, cannot get its algae back, then the coral dies. The animals starve. The polyps wither. And the white skeleton, which already looked clean, becomes truly empty. A bleached reef that recovers is a near miss. A bleached reef that does not recover is a graveyard in slow motion. And the part that hurts is that for weeks, sometimes months, it looked almost beautiful. This is the cruelty of bleaching. The reef gives a clear, visible warning. It changes color. It turns white. The signal is unmistakable if you know how to read it. But to a casual eye, white coral does not look damaged. It looks like a different kind of reef. It looks sometimes even more striking than the colorful version. People in the water with bleached coral have described it as ghostly and even pretty. The horror is in not knowing. The horror is that the warning sign looks like art. I want you to carry this image with you for the rest of your life. White coral is not clean. White coral is not a different shade of beautiful. White coral is a reef in the middle of a medical emergency, calling for help in the only voice it has, hoping the conditions will change before it dies. The reef is asking. We are mostly not listening, and every time the water stays too warm for too long, more of the city flickers off, and more of the lights, on more of the world's reefs, do not come back on. Tell me, in the comments, if you have ever seen bleached coral in person, or if you had ever, before this, understood that the white was not an aesthetic. Because I think most people, before they learn what bleaching actually is, look at white coral and feel nothing. Knowing what it actually means changes the experience entirely. It is the visual definition of a reef in crisis. And once you know that, you cannot ever look at it the same way again. The lights are going off. They are not yet out, but they are going off. Let me show you what a dead reef looks like, because this is the part of the story people do not see. When a reef collapses, when the corals lose the war we talked about in the last chapter, the reef does not just vanish. It does not blink out of existence. It becomes something else, something quieter, something almost more haunting than the living version, because the structure stays. The city remains. It is just emptied out. And what is left behind is one of the strangest and saddest landscapes in the entire ocean. This is the reef afterlife. And I want to walk you through it carefully, because how reefs die, what they become after they die, and what could still happen next, is the entire stakes of this video. So stay with me for the last one. It matters. A dead reef looks at first like a ghost of the living one. The structure is still there. The towers and walls and arches that the polyps built over thousands of years do not collapse the moment the corals die. The skeleton is solid. The architecture stands. From a distance, you might not even notice that anything is wrong. The shape of the reef is intact. The geometry of the city remains. But as you get closer, the difference becomes unmistakable. The color is gone. The vivid pinks and greens and oranges and blues that made the reef look alive have faded to a uniform pale grey-white, the color of bone. The polyps are gone. The thin living veneer that we talked about in Chapter 1, the surface layer that was the actual living animal, has died and washed away, exposing the stone underneath. The city has become a monument to itself. And then, with no living coral to maintain it, the slow decay begins. Algae move in first. With no living coral to compete with no herbivores keeping it in check if those too have left, the algae spread across the dead reef surface, coating the bones in a green-brown carpet. The structure that was once a vibrant ecosystem becomes, in a matter of years, an algae-covered ruin. The complexity is gone. The thousands of small hiding places that small fish used for shelter have been smoothed over. The reef goes from a high-rise city to something flatter and simpler, a kind of underwater ghost town with a lawn of algae growing over everything. Then come the storms. This is the part most people do not think about. A living reef is constantly being repaired by the very polyps that built it. Tiny fractures and breaks are mended. New layers are added on top of damaged ones. The reef heals itself slowly all the time in the background. But a dead reef does not heal. There are no polyps left to do the work. So when storms hit, when wave energy crashes against the structure, the damage just accumulates. Bits of coral break off and become rubble. Larger sections collapse. The intricate geometry erodes. Over years and decades, what was once a magnificent city of living architecture becomes a field of broken bones. Coral rubble. Slabs of dead reef material scattered across the sea floor like the ruins of an ancient civilization, because that, functionally, is what it now is. And the consequences ripple outward. A healthy reef does not just look beautiful, it does work for the world around it. Reefs absorb wave energy, protecting coastlines from storms. They provide nurseries for fish that feed millions of people. They support biodiversity beyond almost any other ecosystem on the planet. A dead, broken, eroding reef does none of that as well. The coastlines it once protected become more vulnerable. The fisheries it once supported decline. The animals that depended on it disperse or disappear. The death of a reef is not a contained event. It is a cascade. The city falls, and the things that depended on the city fall with it. But here is the part I have been waiting to tell you, and the reason this chapter is not a funeral. Because as bleak as the picture I just painted is, the reef story is not over. Not yet. Not everywhere. And what happens in the next 20 or 30 or 50 years is not yet written. Coral, given the chance, can recover. The polyps are slow, but they are persistent. Where conditions improve, where water gets cleaner and warmer trends ease, and herbivores return, and humans stop battering the structure, coral can come back. Fragments survive. Small colonies persist. New larvae settle. The bones of the old reef, if they are still standing, become the foundation for the next generation. Recovery is not fast. It is not on human timescales. But it is real, and it is happening in some places right now when given the chance. And there are people working on this. Real people in real places, restoring coral, growing fragments in underwater nurseries, transplanting them onto damaged reefs, building artificial structures for new corals to settle on, protecting the herbivores, reducing the pressures that push the reefs over the edge in the first place. None of this is a magic fix. It is slow, expensive, uncertain work. But it is happening, and it works, when the bigger conditions allow it to. The reef is not extinct. The reef is hurt, and it is asking, in the only language a reef can speak, whether we are going to let it heal. So here is where I land this video. Because we have spent the last 20 or so minutes talking about something very heavy. The reef is a city built over thousands of years. The reef is a slow-motion battlefield. The reef is bleaching and dying and being broken apart and becoming a ghost of itself. All of that is true. None of it is exaggerated. But the reef is also not yet finished. The story is still being written. And what we do, in our lifetimes, in our choices, in what we demand from governments and corporations and from ourselves, is what decides whether the city stands or falls. The reef is not asking us to save it through some heroic single act. The reef is asking us, slowly and quietly, whether the next century is going to be one that lets it keep standing. That is the question. That is the entire question. I want to thank you for going all the way to the end of this one with me. It is heavier than most of the videos I make, and you choosing to watch the whole thing means something. If you want to do one thing right now, do this. Subscribe. Because more people seeing videos like this is part of how stories like the reefs stop being invisible. The reef is hurt because most people have no idea what is actually happening to it. You now do. That matters more than you might think. And tell me in the comments what you're going to carry with you from this video. The image of the city of bones, the slow-motion war, the bleaching, the afterlife, or the quiet hope at the end that this story is not yet over. I read every comment, and the ones from people who watched all the way to here are the ones I treasure most. The reef is not a dead world, but it is running out of patience, and the next century is going to decide what it becomes.